At 03:47 hours on December 27, 1942, Second Lieutenant Richard Bong was perched in the cockpit of his P-38 Lightning at Loki Airfield near Port Moresby, watching as the sun began to rise over the Owen Stanley Mountains. His crew chief had just completed a final pre-flight check. At only 22 years old and newly arrived from the United States, Bong was an inexperienced pilot with no combat missions or aerial victories under his belt. 40 Japanese aircraft were en route to strike at the Allied beachhead in Buna, and he would be heading directly into them alongside just 11 other P-38s from the 39th Fighter Squadron. Bong had been stationed in New Guinea since mid-November. Originally assigned to the 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Fighter Group, which was still flying Porty Warhawks, he had instead been temporarily transferred to the 39th Squadron by General George Kenney, because they had just received P-38s and required pilots who knew how to handle them. For 6 weeks, Bong had trained and prepared, but experience in handling a P-38 did not equate to surviving combat in one. The P-38 Lightning was unique among fighters. It boasted twin engines, twin booms, tricycle landing gear, all guns positioned in the nose. Exceptional speed in straight-line flight, unparalleled lethality at high altitudes, and the ability to outpace most Japanese aircraft. However, there was a critical drawback: its inferior turning capabilities compared to the Mitsubishi A6M Zero. The lighter and more nimble Zero could complete a full horizontal turn much faster than the heavier P-38. This disparity often led to American pilots losing their lives in aerial combat. American doctrine instructed P-38 pilots never to engage in turning dogfights with Zeros, advising them instead to rely on speed and superior weaponry, exploit height and velocity. Execute boom and zoom maneuvers, descend rapidly, gaining speed to 400 mph, fire your weapons, then ascend back to altitude before the Zeros could respond. Employ a hit-and-run strategy, avoid getting drawn into a turning battle, maintain high speed at all times. Do not attempt to engage in dogfights. This tactical approach was well defined. However, while it functioned superbly during training exercises, it faltered dramatically in real combat situations. Bong had learned the boom and zoom technique at Hamilton Field in California, where his instructors emphasized it repeatedly. They stressed never to turn and face a Zero. Utilize your speed and altitude advantage. Always keep an energy edge over your opponent. Yet Bong was also aware of the cautionary tales shared by pilots who had faced Zeros in actual combat. The Japanese aviators were highly skilled. They anticipated American tactics. They understood that P-38 pilots would attempt to dive, fire, and then climb away. To counter this, they adjusted their tactics. They strategically positioned themselves to compel American pilots into unfavorable positions. They lured P-38 pilots into decelerating, turning, or sacrificing their speed advantage. Once an American pilot was slowed down or maneuvering, the Zero pilots would close in and eliminate them. Throughout the Pacific Theater, American pilots were falling victim to ambushes during turning engagements that seemed impossible to escape from. A scores to have. The training manuals blamed these incidents on pilot mistakes, but the instructors argued it was due to a lack of adherence to doctrine. Surviving pilots had different insights. The issue wasn't poor discipline, but rather combat's unpredictable nature. Combat scenarios often involved Zeros appearing unexpectedly and running out of altitude before evading them became possible. It also meant deciding between following wingmen or adhering strictly to flight doctrine that advised retreating. Bong was unaware of these complexities at the time. He was about to discover them firsthand. Captain Thomas Lynch served as the flight leader, a 26-year-old ace with 5 confirmed kills. 3 of those victories were earned while flying the P-39 Airacobra, which was notoriously inferior to the Zero and often referred to as a death trap. Despite this fulsome sense, Lynch was well versed in energy management and deflection shooting techniques. He knew how to position himself effectively in 3-dimensional space to enhance his strengths, while reducing his weaknesses. Crucially, Lynch recognized that the manual's guidance lacked practical experience because its authors had never faced actual combat situations. He intended to impart real survival skills to Bong. At 06:15 hours, Lynch delivered a concise mission briefing. 12 P-38 aircraft would provide top cover over Buna Beach Head at an altitude of 18,000 feet. enemy planes were anticipated. During the brief, Lynch did not dwell on theoretical doctrine, but emphasized one key point to Bong: stay close and mimic his every move. Follow his turns, dives, and evasive maneuvers without hesitation or questioning orders. Bong grasped this message clearly. He was the newest recruit, tasked with supporting Lynch and learning to survive. They departed at 1640. A squadron of 12 P-38s ascended through the early morning sky, crossing over the Owen and Stanley Mountains at an elevation of 13,000 feet before reaching their patrol position above Buna at 18,000 feet. The atmosphere was serene. The ocean's vast expanse met the horizon in a tranquil blue vista. Beneath them, cargo ships were unloading supplies for American and Australian forces defending the beachhead. This brief respite from tension would soon end. By CAE-10, radar detected incoming Japanese aircraft, approximately 40 fighters and bombers, at Port Moresby, 8 minutes away. Then Lynch's calm voice crackled over the radio, devoid of emotion. He maneuvered his flight into a strategic position with altitude and speed advantages for an optimal attack angle. Bong felt his heart pounding, hands slick with sweat inside his gloves, throat parched. This was far more intense than any training scenario. At 088 and Acidate, he spotted them, specks against the ocean, gradually expanding in size. Eyed number 3, a Val dive bomber accompanied by Mitsubishi fighters with 6 MNR escorts. Lynch kept track of their numbers, 20 Zeros and 8 Vals, making up a total of 40 aircraft. On the American side, 12 P-38s were ready for action. This gave them a 4-1 numerical disadvantage against the Japanese forces. Lynch rolled inverted and dove, with Bong following close behind. As the P-38 accelerated in its dive, it reached speeds of 300 miles per hour. Through his gun sight, Lynch saw the enemy aircraft grow larger until he was firing at a range of 50 yards, followed by 100 yards. The airframe vibrated intensely and the controls stiffened as he pulled back on the stick. Lynch observed his shells tracing through the sky before connecting with their target. A Val exploded in midair, sending debris flying everywhere. Soon after, Lynch was relaying instructions over the radio. Brake right. Zeros were descending from above. Bong's aircraft took a direct hit on the right side. The force of acceleration pressed him into his seat, causing his vision to narrow. A Zero fighter flew by so close that he could make out the pilot's face. It then reversed direction. Attempting to follow, Bong tried to maneuver but found his P-38 heavy and sluggish, as if the controls were working against him. The Zero was already pulling ahead, shrinking in size. Struggling to tighten his turn, Bong pulled back on the stick harder than before. His aircraft shuddered violently, with the airframe groaning under stress. A loud stall warning sounded. He was 2 plackings behind and losing altitude rapidly. The P-38's speed faltered. Lynch's voice crackled over the radio. "Don't turn with him, dive." Bong thrust the stick forward, causing the P-38's nose to dip downward as he descended away from the Zero. As his speed increased, 400 mph, 200 mph, the Zero couldn't keep up. It simply wasn't capable of diving that fast. Bong had managed to get clear, but his hands were trembling violently, and his breath came in short gasps. He had nearly perished within just 30 seconds of his first combat encounter when he attempted to turn with the Zero. Looking around, he spotted Lynch flying at an altitude of about 3,000 feet above him. During that brief span of time, Lynch had successfully downed 2 aircraft, while Bong barely escaped from 1 attacker. Regaining his composure, Bong ascended back to his original altitude and rejoined the formation. Shortly after, Lynch's voice crackled over the radio, calm, patient, and reassuring, telling him he'd learned well. Well! This time, his target was a lone Zero that had become separated from its formation, making it an ideal opportunity for another successful engagement. Lynch arrived after Sunday with an incredible speed of 400 mph. His closure rate was astonishing. The Zero never even noticed him approaching. And they people sane. From a distance of just 200 yards, Lynch engaged at point-blank range, causing the enemy plane to disintegrate into spinning pieces. After pulling up sharply and regaining altitude effortlessly, it appeared as though Lynch made it all look effortless. Bong recognized that he was witnessing someone who had truly mastered aerial combat. a skill set beyond what could be found in training manuals. The engagement lasted for 17 minutes, during which Bong closely followed Lynch's movements. Observing how he positioned himself strategically and utilized altitude to his advantage, Lynch never allowed himself to become sluggish or remain stationary long enough for the Zeros to coordinate their attacks effectively. Instead, he selected isolated and vulnerable targets that were either distracted or off balance, dispatching them with precision before they could react properly. This approach went far beyond what was taught at Hamilton Field. It was something entirely different. Bong got another opportunity when a Zero began pursuing a P-38 below him. The pilot of the P-38 was clearly in distress as he turned slowly and ineffectively, allowing the Zero to close in rapidly. Seeing this, Bong rolled inverted and dove toward the struggling aircraft. As he did so, the P-38 accelerated while the pursuing Zero grew larger in his sights. The Japanese pilot remained locked onto his target without noticing Bong approaching. As soon as Bong squeezed the trigger, 450 caliber machine guns and a 100,000 mm cannon unleashed their devastating firepower. The powerful recoil jolted the aircraft, causing tracers to streak through the sky. Most of them missed, but some made contact with the Zero's right wing, sparking small flashes of light. However, this wasn't enough to bring down the enemy plane. With lightning-fast reflexes, the Zero performed a sharp left roll and began its descent into the jungle canopy. Bong, undeterred, followed swiftly behind. This time, he didn't attempt to match the Zero's maneuverability. Instead, he maintained his speed and dive angle, accurately predicting the fighter's trajectory before firing another barrage of ammunition. A 3-second burst sent a stream of bullets along the length of the Zero from its tail all the way up to its engine. With a sudden explosion, flames erupted from the aircraft's engine, followed by thick plumes of black smoke. The damaged Zero flipped inverted and plummeted toward the dense jungle below, trailing fire behind it. This marked Bong's first kill, but he had no time to revel in his success as Lynch's voice crackled over the radio. "Effective hit." Bong glanced upwards and noticed 3 Zeros descending upon him. His concentration on the target had led to a momentary lapse in vigilance, overlooking his rear position, a critical error. Lynch was already maneuvering for an attack against the diving aircraft. With no other option, Bong pushed the throttle levers forward and dove downward, utilizing the P-38's speed advantage to evade capture. The Zeros were unable to catch him as he descended swiftly. Meanwhile, Lynch engaged them from above, shooting down 1 Zero and scattering the remaining 2. This action saved Bong's life. The entire skirmish lasted a total of 17 minutes. The 39th Fighter Squadron reported claiming 12 Japanese aircraft destroyed, with Lynch accounting for 2 Zeros and 1 Val, while Bong credited himself with 1 Zero and 1 Val. Other pilots accounted for the rest. There were no American casualties. The Japanese bombers did not make it to the beachhead. They retreated once their fighter escort was lost. The mission was a success. Upon landing at Loki at Zernine 115, Bong's hands trembled uncontrollably. His flight suit was drenched in sweat. With legs that felt weak and unstable, he made his way over to where Lynch was conducting the debriefing with the other pilots. When Lynch spotted him approaching, he flashed a grin. "Welcome to the real deal, rookie," he said. The debriefing lasted an hour, during which each pilot recounted their experiences, where they encountered enemies, who they engaged in combat, and how many planes were shot down. Intelligence officers meticulously documented all details, noting confirmed kills, probable kills, and damaged aircraft. The 39th Squadron's performance was commendable. They had destroyed 12 enemy aircraft without suffering any losses, a textbook perfect mission according to the metrics. However, Bong understood the reality of his situation. He had nearly perished within his first 30 seconds in combat. In his eagerness to engage, he attempted to maneuver alongside a Zero and almost failed to keep an eye on his 6 o'clock position, putting himself at risk. It was Lynch who intervened twice, saving Bong's life. Lynch saved Bong's life twice, once by instructing him to perform a dive-away maneuver, and another time by firing at the Zeros on his tail. Without Lynch's intervention, Bong would have perished. Following the debriefing session, Lynch pulled Bong aside and they walked towards the edge of the airfield, where they sat down on some empty fuel drums. Lynch lit up a cigarette and offered one to Bong, who declined. Ignoring his refusal, Lynch continued smoking both cigarettes. For nearly half an hour, Lynch discussed what Bong had done correctly, such as executing the dive-away maneuver effectively and utilizing speed appropriately. However, he also pointed out areas where Bong needed improvement, emphasizing the importance of maintaining situational awareness at all times. Lynch highlighted that Bong must constantly be aware of the positions of all enemy aircraft and always check his 6 o'clock blind spot. He stressed the need to avoid focusing solely on one target and reminded Bong that other adversaries could pose a threat as well. Lynch then elaborated extensively on the close-range combat philosophy, explaining its effectiveness and necessity in aerial engagements. At longer ranges, deflection shooting demands impeccable timing and accurate prediction, with even a single mistake resulting in a missed shot. Up close, errors were less consequential. Aim directly at the target, fire, and strike. Bong listened intently, absorbing every detail, posing questions along the way. Lynch responded with patience. This approach diverged from the conventional gunnery training of the Army Air Force. It was practical wisdom gained through sheer survival instincts. Lynch imparted insights that could not be gleaned from any instructional manual. Over the following 23 months, Bong transformed from a novice pilot with no kills to America's top fighter ace. This metamorphosis did not occur by adhering strictly to doctrine. It happened because Lynch taught him to disregard official guidelines when they threatened his survival. In 1942, the U.S. Army Air Force's official fighter doctrine emphasized that proficiency in gunnery equated to success as a pilot. Training focused on deflection shooting, leading targets, and calculating optimal firing angles from distances of 400 yards, 600 yards, and the maximum effective range of the 50 caliber machine guns. The rationale was to eliminate adversaries before they could return fire. This strategy seemed logical but proved ineffective in practice. Prior to his deployment to the Pacific, Bong had served as a gunnery instructor at Luke Field in Arizona and was well versed in shooting techniques. He grasped the mathematics behind deflection shooting. His performance on the gunnery range was remarkable, yet combat presented an entirely different challenge. Targets in combat were unpredictable, dodging and weaving in three-dimensional space while also returning fire. Bong soon discovered that his range-based skills were inadequate when faced with a hostile target intent on killing him. Lynch imparted valuable knowledge that wasn't covered in the manuals. He emphasized closing the distance to within 2,000 yards, or even closer if necessary, disregarding optimal firing ranges and deflection angles. By getting extremely close, he could ensure hits regardless of his skill level. According to Lynch, the ideal combat range was when you could see your opponent's face through their cockpit. This tactic was incredibly risky as it required flying directly into enemy fire and risking collisions or damage from exploding planes. Lynch's P-38 had sustained multiple injuries from flying through debris after destroying targets. For example, during a mission in late November 1942, pieces of an exploded Zero fighter damaged his right boom, barely allowing him to return safely to base. Nonetheless, Lynch survived due to his profound understanding of this crucial aspect of aerial combat. It was preferable to be dangerous rather than ineffective against the enemy. Risking collision was more advantageous than missing every shot. Bong fully embraced Lynch's philosophy. In January 1943, over the Yan'an Gulf, Bong downed a Nakajima Kai-43 Oscar, making it his 5th kill and earning him ace status after just 2 weeks of combat. When an intelligence officer inquired about his success, Bong explained that he got close enough to see the rivets on enemy planes. The officer warned this was too risky, but Bong maintained it worked for him. Over subsequent months, Bong refined his close-range tactics into a form of art. He developed skills to anticipate where enemy pilots would move next and positioned himself strategically so that their maneuvers led them directly towards his guns. He also learned to use short bursts instead of long streams of fire, and waited until the target filled his entire windscreen before firing, which significantly increased his accuracy. This improvement was not due to better aim, but rather to reducing the distance at which he fired. On January 7, 1943, Bong participated in a mission escorting P-40 Kitty Hawks during a bombing run on a Japanese convoy near Lai. On March 3, 1943, during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, Lieutenant David McCampbell's mission to intercept Japanese aircraft escorting a troop convoy was intercepted by Nakaji Maki, 43 Oscars from the Imperial Japanese Navy's 11th Sentai. In a 5-minute aerial engagement, McCampbell shot down one Oscar fighter. This encounter differed significantly from his previous combat experience. On this occasion, he exhibited improved situational awareness and remembered to monitor his blind spot by checking his 6 o'clock position. Additionally, he put into practice the tactics Lynch had taught him. The strategy proved successful. During that engagement, McCampbell was able to shoot down a Zero with just 3 seconds of gunfire from a distance of 100 yards. Later analysis suggested he may have been close enough to see the pilot attempting an emergency ejection. However, on March 29, while flying through debris-laden skies, McCampbell severely damaged his P-38 Lightning and was forced to make an emergency landing at Maryland Airip. The aircraft sustained irreparable damage and had to be declared a total loss. Remarkably, despite the extensive damage to his plane, McCampbell emerged unscathed from the crash. Upon inspection by maintenance crews, remnants of Japanese aircraft were found embedded in the wings of his P-38, including aluminum fragments and fabric pieces, testifying to how perilously close he had been during the engagement. By April 1943, McCampbell's confirmed kill count reached 14, earning him a promotion to first lieutenant. During an interview with General George C. Kenney, McCampbell explained his preference for engaging enemy aircraft at extremely close range. Despite labeling it as reckless, Kenney acknowledged its effectiveness. Kenney concurred and instructed other pilots to emulate Bong's approach. Although the official guidelines remained unaltered, many pilots unofficially began implementing closer-range tactics. Lynch and Bong frequently flew missions together, fostering an informal rivalry who could achieve more aerial victories against Japanese planes. By July 1943, they were both credited with 11 kills each. On July 26, Bong reached the peak of his combat prowess that day, downing 4 enemy aircraft in a single sortie. This mission involved the high-altitude fighter sweep during which Bong's flight intercepted Japanese escorts protecting bombers. Employing the close-range tactics Lynch had imparted to him, Bong dispatched 4 planes one after another with remarkable speed and precision. The first kill occurred at 200 yards, followed by the second at 150 yards, then a third from just 75 yards, and finally a fourth at an astonishingly close range of 50 yards. Each successive engagement brought greater risk, but also increased certainty of success. Bong's P-38 was damaged by debris from the final kill, and his wingman reported seeing him fly directly through the explosion caused by that aircraft. This aggressive maneuvering earned high praise from Lynch, who congratulated Bong while acknowledging his exceptional skill and daring. "I advised him to slow down so everyone else could catch up with me." Bong chuckled and suggested that Lynch should speed up instead. Despite this, their competition remained friendly. They motivated each other to improve, extend their survival, and hone their skills. This rivalry made both pilots more formidable. In August, Bong was promoted to captain. He named his P-38 Marge after Marjorie Vattendow, whom he met on leave in Superior, Wisconsin. A portrait of her was painted on the nose of the aircraft. Other pilots began seeking Bong's guidance. "How did you amass so many kills?" His answer never changed: "Get close enough that you can't miss your target, and near enough to feel a sense of fear. That's the optimal range." By September 1943, Bong had achieved 16 confirmed victories, just like Lynch. Together, they were the top American aces in the Pacific theater. Although other pilots started to narrow the gap, Bong and Lynch consistently led the leaderboard. They constantly spurred one another on. Each kill by Lynch drove Bong to fly with increased daring, while each of Bong's kills encouraged Lynch to push his limits further. Despite being friends, they were also fierce competitors striving to surpass Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 aerial victories. Back home, the rivalry among ace pilots was well known. Newspapers and radio broadcasts kept track of their scores. The public followed this contest eagerly as if it were a sports event. The War Department recognized its propaganda potential, using fighter aces to humanize the war and provide heroes for Americans to cheer for. Every victory lifted morale, and every interview with an ace boosted sales of war bonds. However, This intense competition had a downside. Some pilots took undue risks in pursuit of more kills, diving into dangerous situations they should have avoided, or lingering too long in combat zones. The quest for recognition sometimes overrode the instinct for self-preservation. Several promising aces perished due to these reckless actions. Bong and Lynch witnessed this firsthand and discussed it frequently. It was understood that survival took precedence over record-breaking, but the pressure never truly dissipated. Media outlets and personal correspondents from home were relentless in their inquiries about performance metrics. In March 1943, Lynch was elevated to major and appointed as the commander of the 39th Fighter Squadron. He subsequently advanced to lieutenant colonel and took charge of the entire 35th Fighter Group. Even with his leadership duties, Lynch persisted in engaging in combat operations, imparting knowledge to novice pilots, and innovating tactical approaches that were often considered unconventional. On March 8, 1944, Lynch flew a mission alongside Bong over Etap Harbor. They identified Japanese barges engaged in resupply activities. Lynch initiated the assault, while DeVello used his cannons to ignite one of the vessels before declaring he would make another pass. Bong followed suit. During their second circuit, unexpected ground fire from concealed 20mm aircraft guns emerged from the jungle. Lynch's right engine sustained multiple impacts and erupted in flames that rapidly engulfed his wing. His radio transmission began calmly but soon grew urgent. "I'm hit, engines out, fire spreading, bailing out." Bong observed as Lynch's P-38 struggled upward through a trail of black smoke. Flames were rapidly consuming the right wing assembly, and Lynch was battling to gain enough altitude for his parachute to deploy safely. Despite these challenges, Lynch managed to ascend to roughly 2,000 feet before the fire consumed more of the aircraft. As flames spread into the cockpit, Lynch knew he had no choice but to eject immediately. Bong watched in dismay as the canopy was jettisoned, and Lynch made his leap from the stricken plane. However, the fighter had already lost too much altitude during this critical moment. Lynch exited at approximately 100 feet above the dense jungle foliage. His parachute began to unfurl but did not fully open due to insufficient height and time for a proper deployment. Tragically, Lynch struck the treetops as his chute was still deploying. The white fabric of his canopy vanished into the emerald greenery below. Bong circled overhead and radioed for assistance immediately. There was no response. Circled once more, but still nothing. Ground-based enemy fire began to target him, forcing him to depart. His fuel supply had dwindled, and his aircraft had sustained damage. He needed to return to base urgently. On the map, he marked the location before ascending to a higher altitude and heading back alone. Search teams combed the area for Lynch over 3 days, but found no trace of him. The dense jungle and perilous terrain made searching difficult, while Japanese patrols dominated the region. As a result, Lynch was listed as missing in action and later changed to killed in action. His remains were never recovered. At 27 years old, he had achieved 20 confirmed aerial victories before his death. Bong ceased flying for a week after this incident, and General Kenny grounded him temporarily. He said he required rest and needed time to process what had occurred. For a week, Bong stayed in Australia without speaking much and struggled with sleep. His mind kept replaying Lynch's release from confinement and the parachute fluttering at insufficient altitude. When Bong returned to his duties, changes were evident. He became quieter, more intense, and showed increased aggression during combat, while also being more cautious about taking unnecessary risks. Lynch had shown him how to be lethal, but his death highlighted that even highly skilled pilots could fall victim to bad luck or random gunfire at the wrong time and place, making it impossible for skill alone to guarantee safety. Bong continued flying through January 1944, February, and March, racking up more victories, experiencing closer encounters with danger, and losing more comrades. The war persisted with relentless brutality as the Japanese forces retreated island by island, while American air dominance steadily increased. Each mission could be his last, yet Bong faced this reality head-on and continued to fly. By late March 1944, he had achieved 25 confirmed aerial victories, just one short of tying Rickenbacker's record. As the pressure mounted, everyone was eager for the moment when he would surpass the mark. Photographers and reporters swarmed him, but Bong remained focused on his mission. concentrating solely on survival and ensuring the safety of his wingmen. On April 12, 1944, during a sortie over Hilandia, Bong shot down 2 Japanese Zero fighters, bringing his total to 27 confirmed kills, exceeding Rickenbacker's World War I record. This made him the top American fighter ace in history. For his achievement, General Kenny promoted him to major and dispatched him on a national publicity tour to bolster war bond sales and give speeches. Despite his disdain for such duties, Bong found himself touring across America, speaking at factories, visiting training facilities, meeting politicians, posing for photographs, and recounting sanitized versions of aerial combat. He never spoke about the fear or the deaths of his comrades. The public yearned to see a hero, but all Bong wanted was to be back in the cockpit. For 3 months, he traversed the country, attending rallies, participating in interviews, and smiling for the cameras. Yet behind the facade, he longed to return to combat where he felt truly needed. General Kenny insisted that his role as a symbol of American bravery was too vital to overlook. Despite his internal doubts about being a fraud, Bong provided what others expected of him. The genuine heroes continued their struggle and sacrifices while he focused on delivering speeches. In September 1944, he returned to the Pacific Theater and was posted at 5th Fighter Command Headquarters as an advanced gunnery instructor. Although he wasn't obligated to participate in combat missions, his role involved training younger pilots, sharing his expertise, and aiding their survival. However, Bong chose to fly voluntarily despite explicit orders prohibiting it. General Kenny turned a blind eye to this defiance, acknowledging that Bong had earned the right to make his own choices. American forces were engaged in the Philippines campaign, reclaiming islands they had been forced to abandon in 1942. The battle was fierce, with Japanese defenders fighting fiercely and kamikaze attacks intensifying. Each mission posed significant risks, yet Bong persisted in flying them. From October 10 through November 15, 1944, he undertook exceptionally perilous missions over Balikpapan in Borneo and Leyte in the Philippines. These were not routine gunnery instruction flights, but frontline combat operations involving deep penetration strikes and fighter sweeps over heavily fortified targets. Despite being exempt from such duties, Bong continued to engage in them voluntarily. He made that decision. During this time, he downed 8 additional Japanese aircraft, bringing his confirmed kill count to 36. The missions had become increasingly challenging. The Japanese had adapted their tactics and no longer attempted to engage in dogfights with P-38s. Instead, they employed hit-and-run strategies, executing swift diving attacks from high altitudes before quickly retreating. Easy victories were a thing of the past. Each kill now demanded skill, patience, and a bit of luck. On November 3rd, Bong shot down 2 planes over Ormoc Bay. A week later, on November 10th, he secured another victory over Lee. 2 more aircraft fell to his guns on November 11th. The kills continued steadily and methodically. Bong was no longer focused on breaking records. Rather, he was committed to performing his duty by protecting American troops, ensuring the safety of bomber and transport aircraft, and clearing the skies. General Douglas MacArthur personally presented Bong with the Medal of Honor at Tloban Airfield in the Philippines on December 12, 1944. Despite the rain, the ceremony was held outdoors. MacArthur discarded his prepared speech and spoke from the heart. Major Richard Irong, who has dominated the skies from New Guinea to the Philippines, is now being inducted into the elite fraternity of Medal of Honor recipients. On December 17, 1944, Bong achieved his 40th and final aerial victory when he shot down a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar over San Jose on Muro Island. This was part of a fighter sweep mission with Lieutenant Colonel Robert Rowland's group. At 14,000 feet, they encountered Japanese fighters. Bong engaged a solo Oscar that had broken away from its formation. The pilot attempted to escape by performing sharp maneuvers and diving steeply. However, Bong stayed on his tail, employing tactics taught by Lynch, maintaining speed and closing the distance until he was within 50 yards. With a 3-second burst of gunfire, the engine of the Oscar exploded. The aircraft rolled over and spiraled downward into the jungle below. This marked 40 confirmed kills, more than any other American pilot in history, a record that would never be surpassed. Despite his immense achievement, Bong felt only exhaustion from 2 years of combat duty, including 46 missions, 40 aerial victories, numerous near misses, and the loss of many comrades like Lynch. The war had taken its toll on him, and all he desired was to return home. General Kenny promptly relieved Bong of his duties, advising him that his service was complete and that 40 kills were sufficient. He urged Bong to marry Marjorie and enjoy a long life. Bong conceded that his active participation in combat had come to an end. He no longer wished to fight, kill, or witness more of his comrades perish. The war would persist without him. Others would take up where he left off. Bong felt he had given everything possible. On February 10, 1945, Bong wed Marjorie at Concordia Lutheran Church in Superior, Wisconsin. Over 2,000 guests attended the ceremony, and it was even covered by international media outlets. The union of America's top ace with his beloved made for an ideal narrative, seemingly marking a perfect conclusion to his story. However, reality did not align with such simplicity. The tale had yet to reach its true end. Following their marriage, Bong received orders transferring him to the Air Force Flight Test Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. In June of 1945, he was reassigned once more, this time to Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, California, where he served as a test pilot for the newly introduced P-80 Shooting Star jet fighter. As Lockheed worked on America's inaugural operational jet aircraft, they sought out combat, experienced aviators like Bong, who were willing to volunteer. Flying jets held a particular allure for him. It was hard for him to envision any other career path. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Bong reported to Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank, ready for another test flight assignment. The aircraft, designated as tail number 485048, awaited him, a brand new P-80 model fresh off the production line. This was Bong's 12th flight in a P-80. He had logged slightly more than 4 hours of jet experience up until this point. Unlike anything he had piloted before, the aircraft featured no propeller and relied solely on jet propulsion for thrust, which offered rapid acceleration and distinct handling traits. Despite these unfamiliarities, Bong felt assured, given his role as a test pilot. As part of his duties, he conducted a thorough pre-flight inspection, circling around the plane to inspect control surfaces, check for leaks, and examine the landing gear. Upon concluding that everything was in order, he entered the cockpit, secured himself in place, and ran through the checklist. The engine started without issue, all gauges displayed normal readings, and every system functioned properly. At 14:30 local time, Bong received takeoff clearance from the control tower. He taxied to runway 15, performed a final engine checkup, released the brakes, and initiated his takeoff roll. Ground observers noted the P-80 accelerating rapidly down the runway, lifting off smoothly, and climbing to around 300 to 400 feet, initially appearing normal. However, witnesses then saw black smoke emanating from the engine compartment in brief puffs, causing the aircraft to start rolling to the right. Bong attempted to correct this by leveling the wings, but encountered further issues as the canopy detached and flew backward off the plane. The aircraft subsequently pitched nose down and began descending. The engine had stopped working due to a fuel pump failure, causing it to run out of fuel and lose all power. Bong was too low to attempt to glide back to the runway or perform a standard bailout. He tried ejecting, but pulling the manual release did not activate the seat. The P-80's ejection system was rudimentary and unreliable. Desperate, Bong unbuckled himself and attempted to bail out manually as the aircraft continued its steep descent, 300 feet, then 200 feet, finally just 100 feet above ground. He jumped and pulled his parachute cord, but there wasn't enough altitude or time for a safe deployment, just like Lynch's fate 15 months prior in another location. The plane crashed nose first into a residential area of Proensensensteist, North Hollywood, with an immense impact. Fuel ignited and exploded, creating a massive fireball. Leo Bong's body was discovered 100 feet away from the wreckage, partially entangled in parachute shrouds. He was just 24 years old. General Kenny received the news while he was getting ready to fly to Manila. The devastating bombing of Hiroshima that morning and the impending end of the war temporarily faded from his mind as he focused solely on Bong's death. Kenny later wrote that everyone in the 5th Air Force felt as though they had lost someone dear who had been expected to return home safely after 8 months of service, only to die tragically during a test flight. The irony was overwhelming. Pause. Headlines across America prominently featured news of Bong's demise, often placing it directly beneath reports about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. In some cases, both events received equal prominence in the press. As the nation's most celebrated fighter pilot, Bong's untimely death at age 24 seemed particularly cruel given the timing. After surviving 2 years of combat and evading numerous threats from the Japanese, a fuel pump malfunction led to his demise. Leo Bong was laid to rest on August 8, 1945, in Poplar Cemetery in Poplar, Wisconsin. She relocated to Los Angeles where she pursued a career as both a model and magazine publisher. Her life continued until September 27, 2003, marking 58 years since the passing of Richard. She remained devoted to his memory throughout her lifetime, often speaking about him at various events and donating personal items to museums to ensure people would remember his legacy. General Kenny authored a book titled Dick Bong, Ace of Aces in 1960, asserting that Bong was destined to be recognized as America's greatest fighter ace forevermore. Given the advancements in weaponry, it is unlikely any future war would offer enough time for another pilot to surpass his record of shooting down 40 aircraft. Kenny's prediction proved accurate, as no American aviator has come close to matching Bong's achievements since World War II concluded 8 decades ago. The combat strategies he developed during the aerial battles over New Guinea were later adopted as standard doctrine by the military. These tactics emphasized aggressive positioning and utilizing speed and altitude, not just for evasion, but to dictate the terms of engagement, despite never being explicitly named in the official manuals. Bong's influence was evident throughout the new tactical guidelines that governed American fighter pilots for 3 decades following the war. In 1955, plans were initiated to construct Richard E. Bong Air Force Base near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with the intention of establishing it as an Air Defense Command facility protecting Chicago and Milwaukee. However, these plans ultimately fell through when the military deemed the base unnecessary, leading to its relocation under Strategic Air Command, which similarly concluded it was not required. Construction ceased, leaving the partially built base abandoned. In 1960, the land was transformed into Richard Bong State Recreation Area. It became a park rather than an airbase, serving as Bong's official memorial established by the U.S. Air Force, a park dedicated to his memory. There is also a memorial in Superior, Wisconsin. The Richard Wong Veterans Historical Center, which opened in 2002, houses exhibits about Bong's life. It features a restored P-38 aircraft on display. Visitors can explore America's top fighter ace and view his uniform, medals, photographs, letters, and other personal artifacts. The center plays a crucial role in preserving his legacy. However, most Americans are unfamiliar with Richard Bong. His name rarely appears in history textbooks, and he is not part of the curriculum in schools. He is not widely remembered as a key figure from World War II. While people can easily name famous generals or battles, few know about the pilot who shot down more enemy aircraft than any other American during the war. Bong passed away before the war concluded, missing out on post-war accolades and media coverage that elevated other military figures to household status. He was reserved. Andau, we saying, made sure his legacy never diminished. Marjorie believed Richard would have felt uncomfortable with all the accolades, insisting he was merely doing his duty. She knew he would also point out that those who truly deserved recognition were the pilots who lost their lives in combat. Yet, she firmly understood how unique and remarkable Richard was. She recognized the significant achievements he had made and believed they warranted remembrance. General Kenny shared stories about Richard Bong with every young fighter pilot he encountered. He described how Bong honed his skills under the guidance of Tommy Lynch. Kenny explained that Bong pioneered a close-range combat technique, completed 46 missions without being downed, and endured 2 years in battle by outsmarting and outperforming everyone else through calculated risk-taking. According to Kenny, Bong exemplified what every fighter pilot should aspire to be: skilled, courageous, humble, and committed to mission success rather than personal glory. The true lesson of Richard Bong's life isn't merely the fact that he shot down 40 Japanese planes. It lies in how he accomplished this feat. He disregarded outdated doctrines when they were ineffective, sought mentorship from combat veterans instead of relying solely on theoretical knowledge, and employed tactics deemed too risky by official standards. He closed distances to a point where hitting his target was almost guaranteed, even if it scared him to the core. By facing these fears head-on, he managed to eliminate threats that would otherwise have persisted to harm Americans. This is how greatness unfolds in wartime scenarios. Instead of strictly adhering to manuals or blindly following instructions, seek out an experienced mentor and absorb all they have to offer. Learn by trial and error in combat situations, even if it means breaking rules. Be prepared to confront your fears because the consequences of inaction are often worse. Richard Bong passed away 80 years ago, and many people no longer remember him. Yet his legacy lives on in American fighter tactics. His approach to aggressive close-quarters dogfighting continues to shape pilot training today. His readiness to disregard official protocols when necessary has inspired military aviators to think independently about their teachings. In Poplar, Wisconsin, a small museum at the local high school houses Bong's uniform, all 26 of his awards, photographs, newspaper articles, and a piece of the P-80 aircraft in which he met his demise. Outside stands a similar P-38 Lightning fighter plane like those he flew. The museum serves as a reminder that ordinary Americans can achieve remarkable feats. It showcases how a young man from Wisconsin became the most successful American fighter pilot in history. His story underscores that true excellence comes from constant learning, adaptation, and rejecting limitations. Richard Ira Bong was an ace with 40 confirmed kills and recipient of the Medal of Honor. Despite being a quiet farm boy, he mastered lethality by closing in on his enemies, so closely he could not miss. He died at age 24 due to a fuel pump malfunction and is interred in a small-town cemetery. While forgotten by many, his accomplishments and methods are revered by those who truly understand them. If the story resonated with you, consider giving this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more overlooked tales from World War II to light. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to stay informed about these important histories. Every narrative counts, and each deserves recognition. Feel free to leave a comment below sharing your location. Our community is diverse, stretching from Texas all the way to Tasmania. Whether you're a veteran or an avid history buff, you are part of something truly unique here. Thank you for watching and helping keep these stories alive.